think there you go. That was what I was looking for. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to call this meeting of the Climate Committee for CMAP to order. We have just a few logistical items that we need to cover before we take the roll. So this meeting is being live streamed on Zoom and recorded. So members, please make sure that you use the microphones that are in front of you so that everyone can hear when you're speaking. Please identify yourself when you're speaking, and especially when you're making or seconding a motion so that the secretary can capture who's making those motions. Welcome to those that are attending in person. Please make sure that you signed in on the sign-in sheet when you came in or on your way out the door. We want to make sure that everyone has a record of that. And if you wish to make public comment, please fill out the public comment card and return it to one of the CMAP staff members, and we'll call on you at the appropriate time. For those that are participating on Zoom, please keep your microphones muted unless you're called upon to speak. This will help eliminate the background noise. You can use the mute button on Zoom, or if you're on a phone, press *6 to mute and unmute yourself. When it's appropriate on the agenda, we'll request comments from those online, and you can indicate your desire to speak using the chat box. Staff is monitoring the Zoom and will recognize you when it is your time to speak. I think now we're going to call the roll. So staff, I think Nora, your job is to call the roll and see who's here.
Thank you. Jack Chan.
Here.
Naomi Davis. Here. Aaron Dernbaugh.
Present.
Robin Grooms.
Present.
Elena Grossman. Samira Hanessian here. Hanessian, thank you. Ethan Kimbrell.
Here.
Thank you. Deborah Kuska.
Here.
Thank you. Scott Kuykendall.
Here.
Thomas Mayard. Edith Macra.
Present.
Paul May. Can come. Mary Nickel.
Present.
Emily Ruswig. Vanessa Ruiz. Matthew Santaga.
Santagata, present.
I have pronunciations, and I'm gonna get that one. Stephen Schaefer
Here, Stephen. Thank you. Present.
and Ryan Wilson.
Present.
Great, that's it. We have quorum, everyone.
Yay, thank you. Thanks everyone for attending in person, appreciate it. So we are able to convene the meeting and do the business of this committee. I don't believe anyone has requested remote attendance. We don't need to deal with that. Okay, great. So, all right, let's just move right on into agenda. Were there any agenda changes that were proposed? Excellent. We will move on to announcements. So I believe first we will hand it over to Bill Barnes, Deputy of Regional Policy and Implementation, and he will deliver the updates from CMAP.
Thanks, Aaron, and welcome everyone. Thanks for coming out for our annual in-person Climate Committee meeting. Recall that recently we changed the way that this committee works by allowing for workshop meetings to accommodate virtual or hybrid participation to encourage actual participation and attendance. And we have reserved at least one meeting a year, and that happens to be this meeting, to approve the minutes of the last meeting and to focus on the calendar moving forward. So we'll be getting to that shortly. But again, it's great to see everyone in person at the old post office. I just have a few remarks that sort of touches on what's been happening at CMAP. They're uncharacteristically light in the number of topics that I'm going to be talking about, but their import is just immeasurable. So I'll get right to it. So one of the things that you've heard about in the past is our Transportation Resilience Improvement Program. It's a project that is looking at soliciting transportation resilience projects to be included in the larger plan. The TRIP project list will be the region's first compilation of transportation resilience projects and can help make the region more competitive for federal investment opportunities, including through the PROTECT program. Project solicitation was sent out to transportation implementers, including planning liaisons for the councils of mayors and governments. We are also asking for projects from our stormwater and emergency management partners in the counties and also at the city of Chicago. CMAP hosted a virtual implementer workshop very recently on the 20th to answer questions related to the project solicitation and to discuss strategies to advance resilience, which will be reflected in the plan itself. Projects, if you're interested in submitting, are due by June 3rd, and questions can be directed to Ms. Kate Vasic. Transportation or actually just public transit is it's a headline on pretty much every paper that you open or news show that you tune in on. Transit's facing a fiscal cliff. They are facing up to a $750 million shortfall beginning in 2026. And as requested by the legislature, CMAP presented its plan of action for regional transit, something that we have discussed with you at length. And part two of that effort was the creation of a document that sort of put some flesh on the bone related to some of the funding options that we outlined for the legislature in the PART report. And that was the Modernizing Illinois Sales Tax, a Pathway for Sustainable Future. It's a document that's on our website in the PART section. And it's something that we pulled together with a coalition of Illinois policy and civic leaders. And as its name suggests, it takes a deeper dive into what it would look like to modernize the sales tax, to broaden the base to include a select number of services. The exciting thing about this type of a push is that it will benefit not just transit, but it'll also benefit municipalities and jurisdictions around the state. So it has a state level benefit. So I would urge you to take a look at that. It's on our website. And then finally, I want to cut this short because we have a very jam-packed agenda, some exciting news to share with you on the climate action front. CMAP's free summer program for high school students in Northeastern Illinois, the Future Leaders in Planning, or as we like to call it, FLIP. We've begun accepting applications for those interested in urban planning and regional issues. The 2025 session will be held in person at these offices July 15th to the 17th, and again, the 22nd, July 22nd to the 23rd. It includes field trips, meals, transportation, and more. Applications are due June 2nd to CMAP, so please spread the word on those, and more information is on our website. Those are all the remarks that I have on behalf of CMAP, but should there be any questions, let me know. I'm happy to discuss those topics or more now or after the meeting. Thanks.
Thanks, Bill. Does anyone have any questions or clarifications for any of those updates? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to the next item. We're excited to welcome a new member, returning organization, but a new representative from that organization. So I'm going to ask Deb to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about the organization and what they hope to bring to the Climate Committee. So Deb Kutzka is replacing Kevin Schnoes to represent Cook County Department of Environment and Sustainability.
Good morning. No, good afternoon, everyone. Deb Kutzka with Cook County. I'm currently the Assistant Deputy Chief Administrative Officer, as well as Interim Deputy Director of Sustainability for the Department of Environment and Sustainability. It's a lot of words. There's a lot of things happening. Right now, I'm really trying to build and grow our team so that we can do all the sustainability projects that we are responsible for. So I primarily am working on things like climate resiliency for communities, expanding our public EV charging infrastructure throughout Cook County, particularly in the suburbs, and then a whole bunch of other things like residential renewable energy subsidies, healthy homes for healthy families, residential retrofits to reduce energy and water and make safer homes for families. And then we have our whole solid waste plan that we're working on, diversion and composting initiatives, again, enhancing, particularly in the south suburbs, our collection and diversion opportunities for residents. So a lot happening. Looking forward to being with you all and seeing what we can do as a county to help support all of our climate initiatives.
Thanks so much. Welcome. We will move on just to a point of action here. We're going to approve the minutes from the last meeting. They were included in the meeting packet that you received from our July 25th, 2024 meeting. So almost a year ago. Were there any, as we move to this new model of workshops and meetings? So were there any edits or corrections? Go ahead, Robin.
My presentness was not recorded in the minutes. I was present at that meeting, but that is not reflected in the minutes. If that could be added, thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? All right, well, we will make sure that that edit gets included. But with that, I'd love a motion and a second to approve those minutes. The amended minutes. Thank you.
Move to approve.
Mary Nickel put forward a motion,
A second.
and Ryan Wilson seconded the motion. Do we just do a voice? All those in favor? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you. We approve the minutes, the amended minutes. And we will move to the next item. In your meeting packet was also update to our meeting schedule. And today we're considering a proposed dates for fiscal year 2026. Were there any comments or anything else around that schedule that was provided?
Yeah, just a reminder that the first three meetings in the schedule will be remote via the workshop format, and then the fourth one will be an in-person meeting again.
Any questions from anyone on that schedule or that arrangement? Hearing none, could I get a motion and a second to approve that schedule?
This is Scott. I'll make a motion to approve.
Scott Kuykendall, move to approve, and Stefan second. Thank you. Stefan Schaefer seconded. Thank you. All those in favor? All those opposed? All right, so that schedule has been approved by the committee. I think I'm going to hand it over to Bill here.
And this next item is informational. On a regular basis, we appoint chairs and vice chairs to the committee. This is to inform the group that we have appointed or reappointed or reappointed Aaron Dernbaugh as chair and Mary Nichols of Chicago's DOT as the vice chair. So we're excited to welcome them. Thank you very much for your commitment to advancing climate issues at the regional level. And, I wonder if you all have any comments you want to make on your behalf.
Just thanks for the opportunity and look forward to continuing to work with you all. As we know, they're trying times, and so it's going to take all of our brains to continue to figure out how we move the agenda on climate forward for our region. So thank you.
Thanks, Mary. And I'll just add, CMAP does such a terrific job of organizing and coordinating these meetings and the associated workshops. But if you ever feel like either of us, you want to talk on the side about some of the, some of the ways we're moving climate forward in the region, I think, we can't do it officially as part of this committee, but I think we're all committed to the things we do personally and professionally towards advancing climate for our region. And so I'll just offer myself up as a personal resource. And yeah, with that, we are going to move on. And thank you for giving us the keys to the car and the agenda.
Power.
Yeah, right. With power comes so much responsibility. So we're going to move to item 4.03, the Regional Transportation Plan. And I believe we have Noah Harris, who is Okay, oh, there's no, who's going to provide an update on this project to develop a regional transportation plan.
Cool. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Noah Harris. Can you all hear me okay? Policy analyst here at CMAP, and today I'm going to be providing a very quick high-level overview of the 2026 Regional Transportation Plan Emerging Priorities. So before we jump in, I want to start with some brief context on the Regional Transportation Plan development process. The RTP will aim to answer 3 central questions, and those are, what transportation system do we want? What are the challenges and opportunities to get there? And how will we achieve the transportation system we want? This chart here shows each of the many streams of work that we're pursuing over the next year and a half to address these 3 central questions. And I think I have an animation here. Today's presentation focuses in on the first 2 boxes there, goals and objectives. More on that in a minute. So yeah, as you might have seen on the last slide, we have a lot of work ahead of us. And here's a closer look at the plan for 2025. The first half of the year has been dedicated to building consensus around our regional vision for transportation and assessing the current state of play in key goal areas. And after the summer, we'll take all of that information and use it to inform strategic discussions about how we will implement our goals for transportation. The Emerging Priorities Report, which is attached to your agenda packets today, marks our first major milestone deliverable for this regional transportation plan, outlining high-level goals and objectives that reflect early research and feedback from agencies and organizations like yourselves and from throughout the region. And before I dig further into the proposed RTP goals, I would like to share some general details about the Emerging Priorities Report. So the document serves as a snapshot in time to summarize key themes and priorities highlighted in the early stages of research and engagement. The report builds off of current and ongoing regional planning efforts, including onto 2050, and it reflects input from stakeholders like transportation agencies, county partners, advocacy organizations, and CMAP board and committees. As such, much of the content in the report is likely already familiar to you as it represents longstanding transportation priorities and topics we've been discussing together for quite some time now. And while the report is a milestone deliverable that helps us make progress defining key goal areas in the RTP, please note that the final plan is where we'll work together with you all to solidify the details. So today I'll be presenting a summary of what we've heard so far, especially those pieces that are most relevant to this committee, and to hear from you about anything that's on your mind, feedback, considerations, and questions there. So the Emerging Priorities Report identifies 5 key goal areas, which you can see reflected on the screen here. Those goals are to strengthen connections between people and places, prioritize safety and public health, mitigate pollution and invest in resilient infrastructure, support economic prosperity and inclusive growth, and finally, strategically govern, fund, and preserve the system. Today, with our limited time together, I'm going to focus in on the 3rd goal area on the screen, to mitigate pollution and invest in resilient infrastructure. Here's a very quick snapshot of the details that make up this goal area in the report. The region's natural resources are a critical asset that support essential ecosystems, foster public health, and make Northeastern Illinois an attractive travel destination. Onto 2050 sets transportation-specific strategies to protect these resources and reduce harmful pollution caused by the transportation sector, especially through emissions. And since the adoption of Onto 2050 in 2018, stakeholders across the region have committed to these goals and made investments to advance them. Current and ongoing climate plans continue to highlight the need to reduce pollution from transportation and to make our transportation assets more resilient to extreme conditions such as storms and flooding and intense heat and cold. Moving forward, stakeholders have indicated that they're looking for the regional transportation plan to provide alignment across these efforts and to continue advancing shared goals in these spaces. Furthermore, I want to emphasize that while we have that environmentally focused goal area that I just presented on, many of the other goals and objectives that make up the report in your packets can support progress in efforts related to mitigation, resilience, and more. Just a couple quick examples. Improving reliability and managing congestion. That's a major component of the mobility goal area in the report. This can also work to support transportation emissions reductions and increase responsiveness to incidents like flooding. Similarly, expanding multimodal access, also heavily featured in the report here, can increase mobility and safety while encouraging mode shift and further support of emissions reductions. Transit-oriented development can support local development and housing goals while also increasing access to sustainable travel options. And finally, efficient freight here can support the national economy while reducing freight pollution. Like I said, these are just a few examples, and as we further develop the regional transportation plan and return to you with updates, we encourage you all to help us identify these opportunities for cross-pollination. For the plan, we'll want to prioritize developing strategies that support all of our regional transportation planning goals simultaneously across the environment, but also mobility and economy and the others in the report. So ultimately, the report is setting the foundation for upcoming work in the RTP, and by outlining these high-level goals and objectives in this early phase of plan development, we can promote greater alignment with subsequent efforts, including data analysis, policy development, and the identification of performance measures. And this certainly includes seeking alignment with other major long-range planning efforts that are ongoing, like the Climate Action Plan and the Transportation Resilience Improvement Plan. So what else do we have coming up here? We have an open questionnaire that you all can take where you can share your transportation experiences and ideas. And this summer, we're transitioning into the existing conditions phase of plan development, and we'll simultaneously be pursuing robust public engagement. And later in the fall, we'll use all of that information to discuss the actions and strategies needed to help advance the region's vision for transportation. So I know that was a super quick overview, but hopefully it was helpful. I'm happy to spend a couple minutes answering any questions.
Naomi Davis, Blacks and Green. Where the couple of slides back, you talked about the multimodal and in the context perhaps of existing conditions. I'm not sure this is the right time or place or you're the right person to ask this question, but with respect to intermodal activity in our community, we're having a protracted problem with communications with the intermodal operators. And I wonder, is there some facilitation or some kind of ambassadorship or ombudsmanship or some kind of way that you can help us sit at the table with the parties and have an authentic, meaningful communication?
Yeah, I can take that one. I mean, that's a great question, and it's an age-old question: is how do we get the community's voices heard with the actors in the space that we want to influence? And back in the day, before I came here, we had a freight committee, one that engaged directly with the actors, the freight actors, and the intermodal operators. That committee has been put to rest, but we are in the process. No. But it was just phased out. But as we are looking at how to implement the RTP, how to engage in the RTP. There's a strong interest in re-engaging with those actors. And that may be a good opportunity for us to bring community voices to the same table as the industry itself. Well, that's good to hear. And as we sort of envision what that's going to look like in the future, we will keep you in mind, definitely.
Robin Grooms from Lake County. I'm curious if, as a part of this plan, as Bill was saying, it's all over the news, the fiscal cliff of everything. Is there going to be some sort of like legislative agenda or a portion in there that says policies we would like to see change up at the state level? We, as a representing the county, we put together a legislative agenda each year that we try to bring down to Springfield, and it's unclear sometimes what position we might want to take on a bill that's going forward. So if there is some way for CMAP to communicate stances or some support for general policy ideas, it could be a really beneficial portion of this plan, if it's not already in there, for us as a wider region to put that voting power together.
Yeah, appreciate that feedback. Thanks for raising that. I would say as a long-range regional transportation plan that we're working on here, we're really at the higher level of policy development and strategy development, but hopefully it's a plan that can inform things like legislative agendas, which we also produce. I think we see direct connections between those deliverables, but the granularity here might not be, this would flow into those efforts to identify kind of legislative priorities.
And there's not a component in every single plan that we pulled together, but the climate action plan that we're going to be talking about is going to be targeting actions or basically framing the levers that exist at the various levels in government. So as we begin to flesh out strategies and propose strategies, we're going to know, is there local action that can be taken in that space? Is there state action that can be taken in that space, or is it federal action? And by defining those, we can also define the gaps. And it's those gaps that can be used to drive legislative agendas. So in the climate space, we will be able to, help you to define legislative initiatives. And it's something that, perhaps moving forward, we can begin to bake that into additional plans as well as tools.
A question that might be answered a little bit later on, but in a plan like this, as you're starting to kind of build it out towards being realized, are you, anticipating maybe a climate action plan? Are you associating kind of climate impacts, quantifying them with any of these kind of shifts? Are you putting kind of any projections and kind of carbon savings or avoided impacts in a specific way?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think we're still kind of transitioning into the strategy and investment phase of plan development. So more to come there. But I will say we're excited to look for alignment between the regional transportation plan and the climate action plan where possible, even if that includes, benefits from implementing certain strategies in the regional transportation plan that come from climate action planning efforts.
All right. Well, hearing no other questions, I'm going to move us along. I did want to make a note for the minutes that committee member Thomas Maillard was able to join us during that last presentation. So if we just make sure that gets added to the notes. Welcome, Thomas. For our next item, we're going to hand it over to Kate Avasik, program lead, who is going to give us a full update on where the region's climate action planning effort is. Last we heard that it was on pause, and since then we have heard that it has thawed and is now moving forward again. So we're excited to hear the update.
Wonderful. Hello, everyone. We're happy to be here. We're excited to be back to this committee to discuss the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan. Needless to say, since our last presentation in October, we've been busy. So we have a lot of progress to share, and I'm joined with Mitch Hurst as well. So our agenda for this Oh, next slide, please. Our agenda for this presentation is to first give you an update on the project funding timeline and the general progress that we've made. Then I'll turn it over to Mitch, who's going to give us some initial economy-wide results from our work to quantify emissions reductions across all sectors. And then we'll close with a discussion around those initial results and how we can use this plan to drive action. And at that point, I'll invite Nora Beck too to join us in that discussion. All right, so moving forward into project updates. So first, I want to just remind you all that this project is made possible through funding with US EPA's Climate Pollution Reduction Grants program in partnership with the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, as well as our sister agency, the Northwestern Indiana Regional Planning Commission. US EPA has recently confirmed that this program is no longer subject to questions regarding funding availability, which is fabulous. Great news to us and hopefully the region as well. And that work on the climate action plan should continue and must continue, because they also, on the next slide, talking about the timeline, they confirm that we still have until December 1st to get the plan done. So while we took a little bit of a pause, we need to get the ship back moving again, and we are moving. So we're working quickly to reach that deadline later on this year. We are more than halfway through. And since we last met with this committee, we were in the process of identifying reduction strategies across all emission sectors, shown in the dark green in the timeline. And since then, we've been able to move on to the modeling work, shown in the two shades of blue. First, what we've been busy doing is estimating how the strategies that we've identified can impact emissions, can reduce emissions. And then second, to analyze how those strategies impact or importantly benefit communities by reducing harmful air pollution and associated health impacts. Another update, we've also made some slight changes to the greenhouse gas inventory. We incorporated revised state level eGrid electricity emissions factors to quantify the impacts of the electricity consumption. And these updated factors had some impacts. They significantly impacted emissions in the residential, the commercial, and the industrial subsectors. And what we found is that Illinois counties experienced a decrease in emissions, and this was largely due to a lower emissions factor, while Indiana and Wisconsin saw increased emissions due to more carbon-intensive emissions factor. So cleaner energy in Illinois, dirtier energy in Indiana and Wisconsin made those, caused those shifts. And that's what generally led to a decrease in Illinois, especially in Cook County, and an increase in emissions a bit from Indiana and Wisconsin counties. When looking at the inventory by sector, these changes resulted in an increase in the proportion of industrial emissions. And so this means that industry is now our largest emissions sector, followed quickly after from the building sector, which makes up 35% of regional emissions. If you've been following along with us previously, buildings made up 40% of our emissions and industry was at 35%. Another update, late last year, we worked with our steering committee to confirm our approach for setting the greenhouse gas reduction targets for the plan. And I want to take a few minutes here to explain this better before Mitch jumps into the emission reduction results. So the approach that we've adopted is to take an economy-wide target of 85% reduction from 2005 levels in gross greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. So that's a mouthful. First, to clarify, gross emissions refer to the total amount of greenhouse gases emitted by all sources within a defined area. But this doesn't account for any offsets from carbon sequestration. So the target is an 85% reduction in gross 2005 emissions. And this economy-wide target means that it encompasses all of the sectors within the economy. This includes energy and transportation, industry, buildings, agriculture, waste, wastewater, and water. Flip those two. This comprehensive approach recognizes that emissions must be reduced across the board to achieve meaningful progress toward our climate goals. This target also reflects the reality that such a densely populated metro area that we have here with significant emissions is unlikely to be able to achieve net zero solely within our own boundaries. We need state and national decarbonization efforts to really supplement the regional actions here. And then lastly, and I think importantly, this approach aligns with targets set by CMAP in the city of Chicago, which aim for an 80% reduction in gross emissions by 2050. And it's also consistent with the greenhouse gas targets for other major cities in states with ambitious climate initiatives like New York City, which has also established an 80% reduction target alongside a statewide net zero goal. So the inclusion of sector targets is also something that's strongly recommended by US EPA and was supported by the Climate Action Plan Steering Committee. And so we'll use the reduction measures and the corresponding modeling results for each sector to set the targets, rather than determining what a target should be from the outset. These sector-specific targets will allow for tailored decarbonization strategies that address the sector's unique challenges and opportunities. And this will ensure that actions on are both effective and also relevant to the sector's emission profiles and the regulatory context as well. They also support informed resource allocation by identifying which sectors can decarbonize more rapidly, which will allow us to prioritize investments where and when they will have the most significant impact. Establishing these sector-specific targets will also help to increase accountability for emissions reductions, providing all stakeholders with a clear understanding of their responsibility and future progress. And lastly, these sector-specific targets will help us align local efforts with broader state and hopefully national goals, ensuring that the region contributes effectively to collective climate objectives while addressing our local needs here. Okay, so to determine the 2005 emissions levels, we used US EPA's state inventory tool to extract emissions data. We did this for 3 states included in our plan, Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin. And then what we did was apply county level shares from the plan inventory to estimate the 2005 emissions data, emissions for the greater Chicago area. What we found through this exercise is that in 2005, this greater Chicago region produced 189 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. And our 2020 inventory shows that emissions have already dropped 20% from that level to 152 million metric tons, which is pretty significant, I think. But we have farther to go, right? So this means that the plan will need to demonstrate how we achieve an additional 65% reduction in emissions, which is equivalent to 123 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent by 2050. So that is our task within this plan. Of course, there are many actions that are needed for us to be able to reach those goals. With your help, we identified decarbonization objectives and strategies for all of the emission sectors, as well as those reduction measures that we can actually quantify through our modeling efforts to demonstrate that pathway to meet the 2050 target. While we can only quantify certain strategies, I do want to stress that our intent for this plan is to lay out a comprehensive suite of all of the strategies that are needed, knowing that we're only able to quantify a subset of those. But it is those subset of strategies that we wanted to dig into today so that we can present the progress that we've made on our modeling work. And so I'm going to hand it over to Mitch here to walk through our approach and some of those initial findings.
Perfect. Thanks, Kate. So now we'll shift to discussing some of the scenarios that we're including within the plan. We'll highlight a subset of key assumptions. Unfortunately, I can't keep you here for 4 hours to review all of the assumptions, but we'll kind of get into a subset of some of the important ones. And we'll also share our initial emissions quantification results with you. There we go. So the US EPA is requiring this plan to present two different scenarios, a current policy scenario and then a plan implementation scenario. The current policy scenario allows us to project out what greenhouse gas emissions could be in the future, given existing state and federal policies. So this allows us to really understand just how far the existing policies will help advance the region toward meeting the plan's decarbonization goals, and critically, to identify how much additional reduction is needed in the plan implementation scenario. The plan implementation scenario reflects the estimated greenhouse gas reductions from the specific measures that will be included within the plan. So this scenario will align with the 85% reduction target that we set as we seek to align with the national reduction goals that Kate just kind of reviewed. And importantly, as Bill mentioned earlier, the plan implementation scenario will be presented by implementer in order to highlight the relative contributions of the federal government, state governments, as well as local governments to reach our targets. So the state and so this breakdown is important to understanding kind of where state and local action can drive progress, and in our region where we may need federal involvement to close the remaining gaps. So we'll start with the current policy scenario. So this includes some policies that I'm sure are familiar to a lot of folks in the room. The first one is CEJA, the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, which importantly only does apply to the Illinois portions of the MSA. So CEJA requires the elimination of all greenhouse gas and co-pollutant emissions from electricity generation units by 2045. There are also elements of the Inflation Reduction Act, which include a variety of incentives related to clean energy generation, electric vehicle subsidies, heat pump subsidies, and quite a few other things. There are federal fuel economy and emission standards, which are NHTSA fuel economy standards for both passenger and freight vehicles, which improve the efficiency of gasoline-powered vehicles. And finally, we have federal appliance efficiency standards, which comes from the Department of Energy. And these standards improve the efficiency of various building appliances. Important caveat with some of these things. And this goes for some of the policies that we'll talk about in the plan implementation scenario as well. We do want to acknowledge that some of these policies are currently under review by the current federal administration. For the purposes of this analysis, we included the policies as they are in effect at the time that this analysis is being conducted. And also important that we will have an understanding of kind of the individual impacts from these measures. So if things are rolled back, we will be able to put a specific kind of quantification number to the impact on our region from that action. So here is where those current policies get us. You can see the emissions broken out by sector for this current policy scenario. So based on this scenario, which again includes the policies described on the previous slide, we project a 37% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from the 2005 levels in 2050. So those reductions occur across multiple sectors, with the largest declines coming from the cleaner electricity generation in Illinois portions of the MSA, largely driven by CEJA. So you see those decreases kind of across transportation, but especially within the commercial and residential building sector. And you do see some small changes in the industrial sector related to electricity usage, though I will point out that a lot of the industrial activity in our MSA does occur in Indiana, so they aren't necessarily affected by some of the current policies of the books. But understanding kind of these impacts, it kind of sets the stage for our plan implementation scenario, which explores what additional measures are needed to close these gaps. So a little bit about how we kind of are developing this scenario. The plan implementation scenario includes assumptions for federal, state, and local policies. So today we're specifically going to focus on the state and local portion of this scenario. So we've separated assumptions by implementer to, again, better understand and communicate how much progress can be made through state and local action alone versus what action may be required from the federal government. So to develop these assumptions, CMAP staff have reviewed existing greenhouse gas reduction policies and programs that are already being implemented or are reasonably achievable at the state and local levels. So this approach really helped us to identify some realistic implementable measures that importantly fall within the control of state and local governments. So I realize some of this text may be a little small, so I apologize. I like details. So now that we've outlined kind of how we developed the plan implementation scenario, we'd like to walk through just a few kind of key subset of measures that we've included in the state and local portion of the implementation scenario. So the important in these assumptions shown on this slide only represent a subset of the quantified measures that we've included in the state and local portion of the plan. So if you see something that is important to you that you don't see on this slide, we're happy to discuss it. We may have included it, and if we don't, we certainly would like to. So in addition to our quantified measures, as Kate mentioned, we are also considering some qualitative measures, which may be harder to quantify or may work hand in hand with some of these quantified measures to kind of implement important other co-benefits to the plan that we feel are important. So these, again, are important to the strategy, but today we'll just be reviewing some of these kind of top-level quantified measures. And we are in the process of compiling a complete list of all of the measures that will be included in the plan implementation scenario, and we expect to have that in the next few weeks or so, and we'll be happy to share that as we have it. So for transportation, we have Advanced Clean Cars 2, which is an assumption that shares 100% of new light-duty vehicle sales are electric or plug-in hybrid by 2035. This policy has been adopted by 11 states and Washington, D.C. There's also Advanced Clean Trucks, which is kind of a co-partner with Advanced Clean Cars that works on the truck side. So this incentivizes new sales are increasingly zero-emission vehicles for medium and heavy-duty vehicles. So you get to about 63% of new sales between medium and heavy-duty trucks are electric or are electric by 2035, and that policy has been adopted by 10 states currently. For buildings, we have building performance standards. So these are a set of emissions or energy reduction requirements for buildings above a certain size threshold. And this measure primarily affects commercial and larger multifamily residential buildings. So I think it targets about 90% of the commercial buildings within the MSA, but just under about 10% of residential housing units, as it really is focused on some of the larger multifamily housing units. And this is based off of a Colorado policy. We also have, kind of working hand in hand with the building performance standards, we have an all-electric new construction measure that either requires or incentivizes all new residential buildings to be electric, and this is based off of a New York State policy. For water and wastewater, we have decommission outdated treatment tanks. So this measure reduces methane emissions from wastewater treatment by replacing outdated tanks with modern technology. And I think this is a good example of a policy where we use some reduction rates that MWRD has already conducted and have kind of gone and scaled those up to apply those throughout the entire MSA. And finally, the last measure that we'll share today is carbon sequestration. So this is kind of this includes a few different measures, I guess you could say, which includes land acquisition, restoration, and avoided conversion of existing sink land as well. So it's really focused on kind of preservation and conservation in addition to acquisition of new lands that may be able to become carbon sinks. And so if we were to implement the state and local measures in the plan, the implementation scenario would result in a 60% reduction in emissions from 2005 levels. So this reduction is largely driven by the significant decarbonization of the electricity sector, not only across Illinois, like we saw in the current policy scenario, but across Wisconsin and Indiana as well. And also broad electrification in the transportation and building sectors. So the commercial buildings do see a greater reduction than residential buildings due to their broader inclusion in some of the state and local policies that we just discussed, specifically in the building performance scenarios. And then important to call out is the orange and dark red bars on this chart. So those are our industrial emissions, a majority of which come from iron and steel production. And it's important to call out that this is an area that is minimally impacted by state and local measures and will require federal action in order to drive significant decarbonization. We do have several measures focused on industrial emissions that we didn't include on that chart, but those did see kind of minimal impact specifically on the iron and steel sector. One, I guess, important caveat is just since the iron and steel facilities are such a large portion of the emissions in this region, if you do kind of conclude that iron and steel subsector is beyond the scope of state and local action, then we do actually see a 72% reduction in from 2005 level emissions just with the state and local portions of the plan. So that is a significant reduction number. And while not getting us all the way to our 85% plan implementation scenario goal, it does make some significant progress. And before I hand it off back to Kate for some discussion questions, we did want to highlight a few key takeaways from today's presentation. So under the current policy scenario, we project a 37% reduction in emissions from 2005 levels. So this gets us about 44% of the way toward the plan's 85% overall reduction target. And if we consider the state and local portion of the plan implementation scenario, the emissions drop by about 60% from 2005 levels, which is roughly 71% of the plan target. So while the 60% reduction is considerable, there is still a significant gap between this reduction and our plan targets. So the remaining reductions will either need to come from increased federal action, which we are kind of working on a scenario that does include federal actions as well, or more ambitious state and local policies than those we've modeled to date. So yeah, those are kind of the results, and I will hand it back off to Kate.
Okay, so looking ahead, yeah, we have just 7 months to go, which sounds like a long time, but it goes by so fast. So this means that we'll be really busy over the summer, and some of the activities that we have underway in June, we're going to be reconvening our 3 sector working groups focused on buildings, transportation, and industry so that we can dive into the sector results and help vet those. We'll also be reconvening our equity working group to dig into the community impacts that we're working to quantify. And then we'll be launching some public engagement activities. This will involve a public questionnaire and also some community workshops. And then we'll inevitably be jumping into drafting the plan because we got to get moving on that. But just speaking to your role as climate committee members, we would like to invite you to attend these sector working group meetings in June as you would like. Open invitation, and you'll see some emails from us related to those meetings. Certainly let us know today if you're particularly interested in one or more. Buildings, industry, and transportation. And then also we've gotten your insights, and we know some of you are much closer to the ground on some of these other sectors, whether that's agriculture, water, wastewater, waste, and carbon sequestration. And so we will have results to share, and we certainly encourage and welcome your review in however you see fit. So we'll be following up on that as well. And then we'll be reconvening for the workshop in July, and we will have no shortage of information to share with you at that point in time. So that concludes our presentation. Thank you for your attention. We're happy to use the remaining time to answer questions that you may have, and also hope to engage in some discussion around these pretty large questions that we've put up here. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that presentation. Does anyone have, actually, let me just mention before we go to questions that we were joined by committee member Vanessa Ruiz, just so we have that noted for the minutes.
I'm Mitch Hurst.
Mitch Hurst.
Mitch, yes.
Mhm.
Hirst.
IRST. Any questions for Kate or Mitch?
Yeah, Kate, in one of your slides, you had showed 2020 levels being significantly lower than the previous measurements. Did you say you attribute that to increased clean energy, or what was the factor for that decrease?
Yeah, I can take that. So a big piece of that comes, you do see decreases across a number of sectors. So the biggest decreases though that you see are just in cleaner electricity from 2005. I will note that obviously 2020 was a strange year. So looking at an inventory of 2020 data may seem a little strange, but I will point out that this is kind of a lot of the data in the inventory is modeled data. And models are maybe not so good at picking up the intricacies of a global pandemic. So I would say that these emissions are more closely aligned with, say, 2019 emissions. And we did go through the activity of comparing these emissions to NERC has an inventory from 2017, and we have our own internal inventory from 2019. So we did go through the exercise of kind of comparing the 2020 results to those numbers. And generally, they were pretty similar, but I would say the biggest cause for the decrease from 2005 was cleaner electricity, as well as some reductions in transportation, which is caused by kind of a combination of cleaner vehicles, as well as a little bit of reduced activity from 2005 levels.
Hi, Stefan Schaefer, NRDC. Just thinking about and appreciate that y'all have 7 months left and good luck in the next 7 months. Just thinking about the reality of, the rollbacks, regulatory rollbacks that are happening, the backsliding that we're seeing in terms of progress in different sectors. I'm wondering if you're thinking about just the feasibility of certain policies within different sectors, and even anticipating ones where we might backslide. So building performance standards as an example, I'm not sure what the trend is, right? But those have been adopted across many different states. Are we expecting to see that slip backwards, and how much of a dent would that, contribute, for example, to that sector's goal? And I guess in response to the second question, does that actually drive, are there kind of contingencies where we would take it even more local to the city level if it's less likely, for instance, at the state? So just curious, if you contemplated kind of almost like this feasibility approach, and where you'd expect to see gaps emerge with targets.
I'll try to take that one. It's nice the US EPA's guidance is for us to show a path of how we get to this goal, right? So we're laying that out. I think it's hard for us to contemplate all of the reduction measures while the ground is shifting a bit underneath us. So for right now, I think we're gonna focus on assuming the current policy stays put, and we're gonna try to build the path to get there. And what I'm hoping is that our analysis will shed light on the relative contributions of some of these policies and can inform all of us on what's really important to retain and keep, and what could be changed and updated going forward.
A follow-up on that, Ed. So my question is a version of that, but getting to the kind of feasibility at the local scale of the policies that were proposed, you shared. Has there already been kind of a feasibility assessment of those policies in any specific way, whether it's political or regulatory? I guess I'm just interested in understanding the kind of prioritization process that you've gone through on what's in the plan, to understand is the roadmap feasible from the start, excluding federal.
Yeah, I mean, what immediately comes to mind is just the process that we took to determine, in the case of the state and local actions, we really were looking at policies that have been adopted, of course, elsewhere, which is going to be a different climate than here. But that was at least giving us a greater level of certainty that this is something that has gained traction elsewhere, and we could see a different version of it here, perhaps. Maybe the percent reductions or the timeframes change slightly from what's what's been adopted in Colorado or California or Washington. Something else that we will likely be coming back to you with, maybe in July, is one of the steps. Now, this is after making decisions on what goes into the plan and what gets modeled. But we are tasked with looking at implementation authority. So that is something where a requirement of this plan is to look at, does an entity have the authority already? And if not, what is the process for gaining that authority? And so that's something else to allow us to look at more implementation focused, but I would say maybe feasibility a bit too.
And while this doesn't get to the feasibility analysis that Ryan was asking about, it does, Robin, get back to your question about the legislative priorities. And by identifying actions at the state level or even the local level, it will help jurisdictions understand the work that needs to be done. Like if we want to adopt the clean car standards that California has, we need to lobby Springfield, and we've got the tools to do it. If we're able to quantify sort of the impacts, positive or negative, depending on the way you want to argue about the side of that argument you want to take, this will bolster that argument and give you the sort of fuel to justify those asks. So if we don't necessarily have a legislative priority set out for you, we will at least let you know the actions that can be taken at the various levels of government, and then you can move on those as needed. So that's what I was trying to articulate earlier. Sorry.
Two comments. One, I just want to praise CMAP for presenting the information so clearly visually. It's just really, for having worked on this for a while, it's just really gratifying to be able to really understand it as it relates to sectors and strategies. So to me, the charts are really helpful. Appreciate that. And it feels like we're making progress. I know there's 7 months to go, but it does feel like we know a lot more than when we started. And then to the feasibility of some of the strategies, a lot of the strategies that are being carried forward, not all of them, but some of the strategies were identified in the climate action plan that we did for the Chicago region in 2019. That was one that the Mayor's Caucus did with the Global Covenant of Mayors. CMAP was helpful in that. And the engagement process for that plan was primarily focused on municipalities. So local governments had a real opportunity to weigh in on the strategies. And then once the plan was completed, that was formally endorsed by 33 local governments. So it feels like many of them have been discussed and are supported by local governments, and any feedback that we would have gotten in that, it's a different plan, and the strategies, I feel like the modeling is more sophisticated, but many of the ideas in terms of local processes and controls and authorities have been approved, generally accepted.
3 things, 2 which are at opposite ends of the spectrum. And if I could get your name again, please?
Kate
Kate who?
Evasic.
All right, I'll get that spelling. Just queries regarding the community-based impacts or measures. I wondered whether there's anyone here from Argonne or whether there's any representation, because Blacks in Green does have a partnership where we are doing some air quality metrics that are specifically designed to be community scale data. Is that on your radar screen at all, or is that relevant in the ways that you're measuring things at this time?
I think we're definitely measuring it at a higher level. I'm seeing nods of, we are not aware of that. So I think we would be interested to learn more about your partnership with Argonne, certainly. But I mean, we can talk a little bit more about the community benefits and how we're quantifying the co-pollutant reductions and health benefits. If I turn it over to Mitch.
Yeah, so an important caveat with this analysis is that our our analysis takes place at the county level. So it's difficult with just the input data that we have to get lower than that. And as you start to talk about community benefits, the county level oftentimes is not satisfactory. So there are ways to kind of downscale some of this data, but if you do have kind of more detailed work with Argonne, we would certainly be happy to take a look.
Yeah, well, that was Argonne's whole point, was that the extrapolation of data down to community level doesn't so much really come out meaningful. And that to pair that micro data with some of the macro data is possibly a good direction to go in.
Yeah, I was just going to add that the main focus of our engagement efforts are to really hear on the ground about the issues, certainly trying to capture air quality issues as well as health impacts and other co-benefits that we want to look at through the plan. And so I think that'll allow us to shine greater light and need in certain areas of the region and within the counties to pair along with these county level air quality benefits numbers that we'll be generating.
Okay, good. I appreciate talking with you then further. At the other end of the spectrum, at industry level, I don't know a lot about it, but I have been hearing more about it, which is high heat. High heat, is that ringing a bell with anyone? No. No, it's a way of doing clean energy at industry scale, which is typically entrenched in the oil and gas infrastructure, but just looking at some other technologies that can possibly function at that scale to produce less emissions.
Yeah. Yeah, so iron and steel is interesting because the way that the blast furnaces work and the 3 blast furnaces in northwestern Indiana work is they rely on coke, which is very high carbon intensity version of coal. And there's a chemical reaction within that process that helps to make the steel. That obviously is very carbon intensive, and it's why those facilities are, I think, 3 of maybe like the 10 highest greenhouse gas emitting facilities in the country. So it is a really unique challenge, and since such a high portion of our industrial emissions do come from those facilities, it is a really interesting challenge. In some ways, they are only 3 facilities in some regards, so that makes it maybe easier in some senses than all of the different vehicles and all of the different residential facilities. But there are some kind of future technology buckets that we have. Those are usually going to be kind of fall within that federal bucket. So we have started to get kind of our net zero plan scenario, which is where we take those federal actions into account. And there we do start to transition iron and steel over to some cleaner fuels. There's hydrogen production, which is a kind of a common one. There's different ways of producing hydrogen that's really important in the actual emission impacts that it has. So some of the details do get really important, and some of that technology is maybe is a little bit more questionable, I guess I'll say. But that is certainly something that we are going to be incorporating into our net zero scenario. Is cleaning up the energy that is used in those facilities. But it is a really unique challenge just because there are some chemical compound, things that occur in iron and steel production that are fairly unique. And it is also interesting to think about because I forget the exact percentage off the top of my head, but a considerable portion of the iron and steel used to build vehicles in this country does come from those 3 steel facilities. So as we are talking about other portions of this plan, specifically EVs or newer residential, newer commercial buildings, oftentimes those are using these byproducts of these facilities that themselves do have enormous greenhouse gas emissions. So it is a really critical piece of the plan to tackle because it does impact so many other areas of not only greenhouse gas reduction in this MSA, but throughout the entire country.
So, sorry, I was just going to mention, we only have about 20 minutes left. So we have a few more agenda items. So I'm going to give it back to Naomi, but I'm going to ask that we're going to start wrapping this
Right, so just
agenda
really
item. Yeah.
quickly then, regarding EVs, is there any conversation around secondary markets and how bringing more EV business into Black and Brown communities? Is there some system thinking or some market making around that is being discussed?
I think that's a really good suggestion, and we'd love to follow back up with you on that.
Okay.
We haven't been discussing it very much, so.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
I believe we had maybe one or two final questions. Samira, did you have one?
I think my question will be quick. Going back to the slide with regards to the different topics that y'all are exploring. I recognize that there's a larger list somewhere else. And I was trying to do a little quick sleuthing, but didn't find it. Just wondering if the energy or power sector is a part of that, just considering at the state level, we're anticipating a new energy omnibus this session that will work on some of our grid infrastructure issues. But that's a really big area, and like considering the city of Chicago's recent solar procurement, I think there's a really clear opportunity here to talk about clean and renewable energy procurements at the state, local, regional levels. So just wanted to highlight that and ask if it's already under consideration.
Yeah, we will have an electricity generation section within the plan where we touch on a lot of those things. And so for the modeling purposes, we're using some National Renewable Energy Lab standard scenarios that they produce, which model a variety of different kind of clean energy paths. So that's why we're handling it from a modeling perspective. But I think within that energy generation section of the plan, that's where we would like to touch on some of those more, maybe they're not necessarily quantified, but maybe they are more qualitatively discussed in some of those strategies.
Thank you.
All right, so I think I'm going to wrap this section up. I am going to use the chair's prerogative just for 1 second to ask a clarifying question. Do you have to meet the 85% target? I know that was stated as the initial goal, and then you're sharing a plan that only hits the 75% goal?
Well, so right now that's a plan that just includes the state and local portion. So theoretically, the federal actions would take us to that 85% level.
Thank you. That clarifies it. I appreciate it. Thank you. And then maybe just one last plug here as at the end of this section on how you would like the committee members, specifically on the agriculture, water, wastewater, waste, and carbon sequestration sections to contribute.
Yeah, we're admittedly still figuring that out, given the proportion of emissions dedicated to buildings, industry, and transportation, that's where we're putting most of our efforts at this moment. But we'll follow up in short order, both with the meeting invitations for those working group meetings, and then also a more clear path forward for how we would like to get feedback on those other sectors. And that might be more in terms of, maybe it's a one-off, a one-on-one, maybe there's a few of you that want to come together and we can have a focus group. We'll figure that out, I think, once we gauge interest and are far enough along where we can start to share out that information. Thank you.
Thanks. And thanks, Kate and Mitch, for those updates. We really appreciate them.
Everyone.
We're going to move on to our next agenda item, which is connected, I think, in some ways to some of the legislative discussions that were happening in other agenda items. So Ryan Gugis is a specialist. Will provide an update on relevant bills that are filed with the General Assembly that are relevant for this committee. Thank you.
Hey, good afternoon. Yeah, I'll keep my remarks brief. I know we're kind of wrapping up climate committee, but first just wanted to highlight our Strengthen Communities Funded Initiative. This is a CMAP led initiative where, we're pursuing a $2 million appropriation to really support our technical assistance program and really trying to bolster up and expand that program and also, help us to meet our requirements under the Illinois Regional Planning Act. So we've been pursuing this funding for the last few years, and every year we get really close. And it's all, there are always challenges, that arise, especially this year with the budget challenges. But we're keeping, we're going to continue to persevere forward and engage with members of the General Assembly to really ensure that this is in the FY26 budget. So. Really, and that's really the goal of the legislation, is to incorporate it into the FY26 budget. I know we filed a bill, we did a committee hearing, and John Carpenter, our IGA director, has been down in Springfield pretty regularly, again, communicating and really advocating, for this funding to again support our technical assistance offerings, and then our fulfill our requirements under the RPA. As session winds down, right, we're headed into the final week. This is where the rubber meets the road, right? And things we really begin to see things happen in the General Assembly. So this Friday is the third reading deadline for the opposite chambers bills. And then they're scheduled to adjourn on Saturday, May 31st. That's the goal, right? Anything, as we know, things can always change. I've been hearing that they may pass a budget May 31st and then come back in the summer or come back later once they kind of see what happens with the federal budget. That's process is currently underway. And then also in the transit reform space, transit reform conversations, they remain very active in the General Assembly. We're hearing that, legislation that's addressing transit governance reform will be forthcoming in a few days or so. Again, all this is subject to change and at the will of the General Assembly. So we'll see what happens. But additionally, the RTA, they also put forth their legislative proposal based on their transforming transit vision as well. So we've also been asked by a few legislators to participate in some transit town halls. So we got a chance to go out into the region in Westmont, Algonquin, and Evanston to engage with some local constituents just in terms of, transit and what's anticipated and how that will affect their, those respective communities. And so we were able to answer some questions and again, engage with some constituents and really just talk through some of the proposals that are on the table right now. We may be also participating in some additional transit town halls. There are some inquiries out there from Senator Villavalom and Senator Feigenholtz, and then Representative Williams and Representative Croak as well. And so beyond that, we're continuing to engage with legislators on our sales tax modernization joint paper. I think Bill had mentioned that earlier. And so that's something that we in a coalition of civic organizations, put forth to really address some of the fiscal challenges with our transit system. And so, again, just engaging with legislators and making sure to, provide good data, good research, and provide information to the extent that it's helpful as that proposal, may be under consideration. Also in your packet of materials, I know I've outlined just some legislation that we're tracking that may be helpful or beneficial or just informative to the Climate Committee. And so that's there just as an FYI. And with that concludes my update, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Ryan. Any questions? Oh, go ahead, Thomas.
Again, thank you for the work. Is there a particular champion that you're working with regarding the technical assistance funding?
Yeah, Representative Will Davis is our lead sponsor. And then we also have a very bipartisan, diverse group of legislators that also signed on as co-sponsors as well. But Rep. Will Davis from the South Suburbs is our lead sponsor. So
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Perfect. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 5, committee member updates. Are there any updates from any of the committee members they'd like to share? All right, hearing none. Any other business from CMAP staff? All right, well then, we're just going to turn it over for public comment. I see there were a few chats that came in to the Zoom, but first, before we turn it to the online, were there any in-person comments? I don't think so, no. How about any of the online comments? Do we need those read into the notes? Oh, just clarification from CMAP staff. Terrific. All right, well, look at that. All right, my worry about time is not quite as pressured as I thought it might be. It's those chats where that red dot over there on the Zoom was calling me. You sure can. Go ahead, name it, Naomi.
Technical assistance consist of?
No, thank you for the question. So, for the last decade or so, CMAP has, has been spearheading and leading our planning technical assistance program. And it's really where local municipalities and our local government partners throughout the region can apply for different types of planning assistance. So ADA transition plans, comprehensive plans, bike and pedestrian plans, all sorts of different types of planning and technical assistance. And really what we found is that the needs of our local units of government, sometimes they go beyond just transportation related planning. And so because of how we're funded, we're limited sometimes in the planning assistance that we can provide. And so, again, our funded initiative is to really try to broaden and expand that, to be a little bit more dynamic, adaptive, and responsive to those local planning needs, right? Sometimes issues come up, right, in local government that you can't necessarily plan for, or that the comprehensive or long-range plan didn't accommodate or didn't, maybe consider. And so we just want to be, continue to just add value to the region and to our local government partners by, again, just broadening and expanding that program a little bit. So,
Thank you.
sure. Thank you.
Okay, well, with that, I think I'll just mention that our next meeting will be a workshop style meeting, so it'll be online. It's scheduled for July 17th at 1 p.m., but held in accordance with the Open Meetings Act. And if there's no other questions or comments, I will convene the meeting at 2:24. Thanks, everyone. We're adjourned.